When a man finds himself alone, truly alone, there is a silence that sinks deeper than sound. It's not just the absence of voices around him, but the absence of understanding, the absence of comfort, and the absence of anyone who truly sees the storm within. In this silence, he begins to feel the weight of everything he once leaned on. The people he trusted are distant. The friendships that once felt strong are now hollow echo. The support he once counted on disappears like mist under the morning sun. The world keeps moving, but he stands still unseen, unheard, untouched. At first, he questions why. Why has life brought him to this place of emptiness? Why does it feel like every door has shut, every voice has gone quiet, and every helping hand has pulled away? His mind replays the moments when he gave everything, trusted blindly, and stood by others only to be left with nothing in return. This isn't bitterness speaking. It's a soul searching for meaning in the wreckage. It's the heart trying to understand why even those who promised to stay have vanished in his darkest hour. This is not the loneliness of a quiet evening or a missed phone call. This is the loneliness that strips away every illusion. It's the kind that makes a man confront what truly holds him together. When there's no applause, no reassurance, and no audience, a man starts to see himself clearly, not the version others see, but the raw, unfiltered self that only pain can uncover. It's uncomfortable, it's heavy, but it's real. And in that reality, something begins to shift. He realizes that everything he once clung to for identity titles, relationships, wealth, statuscan vanish in a moment. The world is quick to celebrate success, but it rarely shows up when the ground collapses. And when the dust settles, all that's left is the man and his soul. No distractions, no noise, just truth. That's the silence of isolation, not a punishment, but a mirror. A mirror that reflects who he truly is when there's no one left to impress. It is in this stillness that a man begins to wrestle with questions that have no easy answers. Who am I without them? What remains when everything is gone? These questions are not asked out of despair, but out of awakening. They mark the beginning of a different kind of journey, not outward, but inward. Not toward validation, but toward purpose. There's a strange kind of clarity that only comes in solitude. It removes the filters. It silences the lies. It forces a man to see not what he has, but what he believes. And when belief is all he has left, the foundation begins to form. It's not loud, it's not visible to others, but it's real and it's strong. Because it comes from within, not from the world, but from the source of life itself. When a man has no one but God, that silence becomes sacred. It's no longer empty, it's filled with potential. What looked like abandonment was actually alignment. What felt like loss was really preparation. Because in that silence, something eternal begins to speak. Something the world can't give and can never take away. And though the man is still alone in the eyes of others, he's no longer empty. He's being rebuilt, not by the hands of men, but by the presence of something greater, something that has never left, never wavered, and never needed the spotlight. So he sits in the silence, not as a victim, but as a man on the edge of something powerful. The world may not see it yet. They may think he's finished. But they don't understand that when a man has no one but God, he has already found more than enough. There comes a moment in every man's life when the weight becomes too much to carry. The strength he once relied on begins to crack. The plans he built so carefully fall apart one after another. It's not a sudden collapse, but a slow unraveling and exhaustion that creeps in and takes hold. He tries to keep pushing, tries to stand tall, but something inside him is breaking. Not because he's weak, but because he's human. Every man, no matter how strong, has a breaking point. And when that point is reached, there is no hiding from it. This is the moment when his mind grows quiet, not in peace, but in defeat. There are no answers, no strategies, no clever thoughts to fix the mess. The mind that once controlled so much can barely hold on. It's not just the loss of control, it's the realization that control was never real to begin with. And now, stripped of every illusion, the man faces what he cannot fix, cannot change, cannot escape. He faces the storm not around him, but within him. In this place, emotions collide. Frustration turns into sorrow. Anger melts into silence. Pride gives way to humility. And the heart, once guarded by ego and achievement, now opens wounded but honest. This is where the soul begins to whisper. Because when the outer world offers no comfort, the inner world starts to speak. It doesn't speak in loud answers or instant solutions. It speaks in stillness, in brokenness, in truth. And that truth is simple. He is not enough on his own. But even in that truth, there's something sacred, The breaking point is not the end, it's the beginning. It's the moment where self-reliance finally surrenders, where the man no longer tries to force life into his plan, but begins to ask with all sincerity, what now? And that question, born not from fear but from surrender, is powerful. It opens the door not to more effort, but to deeper faith. And from that place of surrender, a new kind of strength begins to rise not from the man, but through him. From the earliest days, the world teaches a man to depend on what he can see. He is told that success is built through networks, that safety is found in wealth, that power lies in popularity, and that happiness comes from the validation of others. And for a while, he believes it. He chases the applause, builds relationships, stacks achievements, and builds an image strong enough to impress and secure enough to lean on. But what the world never teaches him is that these things are temporary, that even the strongest of structures can collapse, that even the loudest cheer can fall silent, that people leave, money fades, and status disappears in the blink of an eye. So he builds his identity on fragile ground that feels solid until the storm comes. And when it does, the illusion shatters. The phone stops ringing. The crowd disperses. The people who once stood by him begin to fade into the background. Some were never truly there to begin with. Others simply weren't built to weather the storm with him. Either way, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The support he depended on was never permanent. In that moment, he starts to understand something that can't be taught through books or speeches. It must be lived. The truth that no human being, no position can carry the full weight of his soul. They can support him for a while, but they were never meant to be his foundation. That role belongs to something far greater. Because no matter how strong the hands of others may seem, they are still human. And no matter how high a man climbs, if his foundation is built on others, the fall is always just one moment away. This realization isn't bitter, it's liberating. It frees the man from false dependencies. It shows him that what he thought was strength was really a crutch, that what he thought was loyalty was sometimes just convenience. And in shedding these illusions, he begins to see clearly, not with his eyes, but with his spirit. He sees that only one presence has remained unchanged through every rise and every fall, God. And when he sees that, the search for worldly support no longer controls him, because now he knows the difference between what is fleeting and what is eternal. Something begins to change when the noise of the world dies down, when the distractions are stripped away and the weight of solitude settles in. A man starts to hear something he never noticed before. It's not a voice from outside, but something within, quiet, steady, and timeless. It's not dramatic. It doesn't demand attention. But it's undeniable. It's the beginning of awakening. Not the kind that comes from success or recognition, but the kind that emerges when everything else has failed to fill the void. It's the stirring of the soulless sacred whisper that reminds him he was never truly alone, even in the silence. This awakening doesn't arrive in a single moment. It grows slowly. At first it feels like a question, what if there's more than this? What if the emptiness isn't a curse, but an invitation? What if this silence is not the end, but the beginning of something eternal? These questions don't bring instant answers, but they point his heart upward. And that's where the shift begins, not outward, not toward people, possessions, or plans, but inward and upward, toward something greater, toward the only presence that was there in the pain, in the silence, and in the breaking. He starts to notice how peace doesn't come from fixing everything around him, but from surrendering everything within him. The more he lets go, the clearer his spirit becomes. The noise of doubt, fear, and anger begins to quiet, not because the problems have vanished, but because his soul is beginning to listen to a higher voice, a voice that doesn't speak in fear or confusion, but in truth and stillness. And in that stillness, he feels something he hasn't felt in a long time, hope. This is the moment where faith is born. Not blind belief, but the deep awareness that there's more to life than what can be seen. That beyond the chaos, beyond the pain, beyond the silence, there is purpose. And that purpose doesn't come from the world, it comes from God. The man doesn't need to shout to hear it, he doesn't need others to confirm it. In the quiet, it rises like a gentle flame. And for the first time in a long time, he doesn't feel lost, he feels found. There comes a moment when the soul finally lets go. Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. A man realizes that the strength he tried to force was only making him sink deeper. He tried to carry burdens that were never his to hold. He tried to control outcomes that were never his to command. And in that silent, sacred moment, he surrenders. not to defeat, but to something far greater. It's not a giving up, it's a giving in, a release of pride, fear, and ego. A man on his knees is not a man who is weak, he is a man who is ready. This surrender doesn't mean he has no fight left. It means he has finally found the right direction to fight toward. No longer wasting energy resisting what he cannot change. No longer clinging to what is already gone. Instead, he turns his heart to the only one who never left. The surrender is quiet, but it shakes the foundation of everything he once believed. It is in this moment that the deepest transformation begins. Because a surrendered man is no longer held back by the illusion of control. He is free. And in that freedom, something sacred happens. He starts to see that real power doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from trusting the one who does. He no longer needs to predict the future or understand every step. He simply needs to obey the next right thing and let God take care of the rest. That kind of faith doesn't make sense to the world. But it brings peace that the world can't touch. Because it's not rooted in logic, it's rooted in truth. What rises from this surrender is stronger than pride, louder than fear, and deeper than pain. It's a quiet strength built not on the approval of others, but on the presence of the Almighty. It cannot be shaken because it is no longer built on shifting ground. It is anchored in something eternal. And from that place of surrender, a man begins to rise not as he was before, but as who he was always meant to be, humbled, focused, and filled with a power that is not his own, but flows through him endlessly. Out of surrender comes a strength the world cannot comprehend. It's not loud, it doesn't boast, it doesn't need recognition, but it's real and it's unshakable. This strength doesn't come from physical power or clever plans, it comes from alignment. A man who walks with God walks with the source of all power, all wisdom, and all peace. He no longer depends on his own limited capacity. He draws from a well that never runs dry. He speaks with conviction, not because he knows everything, but because he knows who walks with him. This strength shows up in the quiet moments. When doubt whispers and fear tries to creep back in, he doesn't collapse like he once did. He stands. Not because the weight is lighter, but because he is no longer carrying it alone. He knows he was never meant to. And with that awareness, something inside him changes. He becomes steady, calm in chaos, bold in uncertainty, and firm in storms. The world may try to understand it, but it can't, because this strength isn't of the world. He no longer moves through life trying to prove himself. He doesn't need validation. He doesn't seek applause. His worth is no longer attached to outcome or opinion. His identity is rooted in something higher, something that cannot be shaken by failure or lifted by success. And from that rooted place, he gains clarity. He knows what to fight for. He knows when to speak and when to be still. He is led not by pressure, but by purpose. This is divine strength. It doesn't flash, it endures. It doesn't dominate, it guides. It doesn't break, it bends, and then rises stronger. When a man walks with God, he walks with a fire in his soul that no wind can extinguish. His battles may not disappear, but his spirit no longer bows to fear. He knows the source of his strength. And with every step, he proves that the most powerful man is not the one who conquers others, but the one who has learned to conquer himself through the strength that only God can give. When the foundation shifts from self to God, the rebuilding begins, but not in the way the world expects. It doesn't start with fixing what was lost on the outside. It begins within. Slowly, quietly, deeply. This rebuilding is not about returning to who he used to be. It's about becoming who he was always meant to be. A man no longer defined by status, relationships, or possessions, but by his character, his faith, and his purpose. And this time, the structure that rises is not built by his own hands alone. It's shaped by divine wisdom. He no longer rushes. He doesn't grasp for quick solutions or temporary relief. He learns to trust the timing of something greater. With each step, he becomes more aware that the process matters just as much as the outcome. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every delay becomes a refining. And every quiet day becomes a building block. The man who once measured progress by visible results now measures it by inner strength, peace, and clarity. Because he understands now true progress is invisible before it's undeniable. He rebuilds with intention, not trying to copy what others are doing, not trying to chase what he once wanted, but listening deeply to what God is calling him toward. The voices of the world grow quieter, and the voice within grows louder. Not the voice of ego, but the voice of truth. And in that truth he finds his way, step by step, brick by brick. He doesn't need to see the entire path. He only needs to take the next step in faith. What's being rebuilt is stronger because it's rooted in surrender. It's cleaner because it's filtered through truth. And it's unshakable because it's grounded in God. There are no shortcuts, no easy roads, but there is peace, because he knows now anything built with God will last. And this time he's not just building a life, he's becoming a vessel, a man through whom strength, purpose, and light can flow, not for applause, not for comfort, but for something eternal. That's how the rebuilding truly begins, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. As the man continues to walk this new path, something sacred begins to form within him, unshakable peace. Not the kind that comes when everything goes right, but the kind that remains even when everything goes wrong. This peace doesn't depend on outcomes or conditions. It flows from trust, trust in the process. Trust in the presence of God. Trust that even when things don't make sense, they are still being worked together for something greater. It's not blind hope, it's anchored faith. A faith that holds steady even when the world around him is falling apart. This peace becomes his armor. When confusion tries to return, when fear whispers its lies, when the past tries to haunt him, he stands firm. Not because he is fearless, but because he is no longer ruled by fear. He knows where his help comes from. He knows whose hand holds him. And because of that, he can walk through storms without being shaken. He doesn't panic in uncertainty. He doesn't collapse under pressure. He is still even in chaos, because the calm within him is deeper than the noise around him. This peace changes the way he sees life. He stops striving for things that once controlled him. He no longer needs to chase validation, because he has found contentment in presence. He no longer drowns in the unknown, because he trusts the one who knows all. He starts to notice beauty in simplicity, strength in stillness, and meaning in moments that used to pass him by. The man who once fought so hard to control his life now walks with open hands, knowing that surrender brings more than struggle ever could. He is no longer defined by how much he has, how loud he is, or how others see him. He is defined by the peace he carries, the kind that doesn't shout, but speaks volumes. The kind that comes only when a man has been emptied of himself and filled with something greater. And in that peace, he is no longer just surviving. He is living, breathing, and walking in a strength the world can't give and can never take away. As the man walks further down this path, he begins to notice that the world no longer has the same hold on him. The pursuit of success, the chase for status, the need for validation, they all begin to lose their grip. He's no longer driven by the desire to impress others or to build an image. He's no longer measuring his worth by what he can achieve or accumulate. His sense of identity is no longer tied to what he owns, what he does, or what others think of him. His worth is found in something much deeper, his connection to God and the purpose that comes from that connection. This shift in identity is profound. It frees him from the constant striving and anxiety that once ruled his life. He no longer feels the need to prove himself because he already knows who he is. He is not defined by his failures or his successes. He is not defined by the opinions of others or by the standards the world sets. He is defined by his faith, his integrity, and his relationship with God. And in that truth, he finds freedom. The chains of comparison, jealousy, and competition begin to fall away. He is no longer bound by the need to be better than others. He is simply focused on being the best version of himself that he can be, not for the world's approval, but for God's glory. With this shift comes a deep sense of peace. No longer does he seek fulfillment in external accomplishments or recognition. He knows that true fulfillment comes from living in alignment with his purpose. He begins to understand that his value isn't in what he achieves, but in who he is, becoming someone who is grounded in faith, humility, and integrity. The man who once felt lost and uncertain is now filled with clarity and purpose. He no longer seeks the approval of the world because he has found the only approval that matters, the approval of the one who created him. In this newfound peace, he no longer fears failure or the unknown. He is no longer obsessed with outcomes because he knows that his worth is not tied to them. He is not afraid to fall or make mistakes because he knows that these are simply part of the journey. His faith carries him forward, knowing that each step, each stumble is part of God's plan for his life. And with each passing day, he grows stronger in that faith. He is no longer just a man living for himself. He is a man living for something greater, living in alignment with a purpose far beyond what he could have ever imagined. The journey a man undertakes when he surrenders fully to God is not a journey without challenges, but it is one filled with purpose. Each trial, each difficulty, each moment of uncertainty becomes an opportunity to grow in faith, resilience, and trust. The man who has no one but God learns that even the toughest moments hold valuable lessons. He learns that it is not the absence of hardship that defines him, but how he responds to it. In every storm, in every setback, he finds a new depth of strength and wisdom. Not the kind that comes from his own efforts, but the kind that flows from a source far greater than himself. This strength doesn't shield him from pain, but it teaches him how to carry it. It doesn't erase the battles, but it gives him the courage to fight with purpose. Each challenge becomes a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. And as he rises again and again, stronger and more steadfast, he realizes that the trials weren't meant to destroy him, they were meant to refine him. With each victory over adversity, he finds a deeper sense of peace, knowing that he is not walking alone. God is with him, guiding him, strengthening him. And through that divine guidance, he becomes a man who not only survives the storms, but grows stronger because of them. This is the transformation of a man who has learned that his true strength lies not in his ability to control or conquer, but in his ability to surrender and trust. The world teaches him to rely on his own willpower, but God teaches him to rely on faith. And through that faith, the man discovers that there is no greater power than the ability to let go and let God lead. This is the moment when he stops fighting the flow of life and starts moving with it. He no longer resists what is coming, but accepts it with grace and confidence. He knows that whatever is meant to be, will be, and that God's plan for him is greater than any plan he could have devised. In this place, he finds the peace that surpasses all understanding. It is the peace that only comes from knowing that he is walking exactly where he is meant to be. And as he continues his journey, he knows that no matter the challenges ahead, he will never walk alone. For when a man has no one but God, he has everything he will ever need.